I will discuss on cost effectiveness, cost benefit analysis and outsourcing. The topics of presentation are mentioned herewith. First, I will mention introduction to cost effectiveness analysis, its definition and purpose. Second, how cost effective analysis works, its measuring cost effectiveness, example scenario. Third, when and why cost effective analysis is useful, key applications, comparisons with cost benefit analysis. Fourthly, applications of cost effectiveness analysis. Fifth, advantages and disadvantages of cost effective analysis. And sixthly, introduction to cost benefit analysis, its definition, key component and steps in conducting CBA. Seventh, comparison cost effectiveness analysis versus cost benefit analysis, differences in approach and outcomes, practical examples. Eighthly, overview of outsourcing, its definition and significance, types, offshoring, nearshoring, multishoring, strategic outsourcing. Ninth, process of outsourcing, multiple processes explained in my slides. 10th, benefit of outsourcing, key benefits. 11th, conclusions and key takeaway, conclusions and key takeaways when to use cost effectiveness analysis versus cost benefit analysis. Importance in decision making and resource allocation. So first of all, we try to know what do you mean cost effectiveness analysis. Cost effectiveness analysis is commonly used in infrastructure asset management instead of a full cost benefit analysis where the objective is to sustain the existing standard of service. The replacement or refurbishment of an existing infrastructure asset is a good example in this context. In effect, the benefits side of the equation is held constant at some predetermined standard of service and various options for providing that standard of service are then compared with the least cost method identified as the preferred option. Secondly, cost effectiveness analysis measures the ratio of the cost of a program to the effects it has on one outcome. It contains measures the cost for a given level of effectiveness, that is cost of increased school attendance by 1 year, or measure the level of effectiveness for a given cost year of additional attendance introduced by spending $100. This is the diagram of cost effectiveness analysis. Cost effectiveness analysis can be described in 3 ways. First of all, compare the cost of an intervention to its effectiveness measured in natural health units. Along with cost effective analysis is used when the alternatives produce a common health outcome of interest but are achieved to different degrees. Thirdly, typically expressed as a ratio cost per natural unit effect per unit cost. When and why is cost effectiveness analysis useful? First of all, good option when there is one key specific outcome of interest, which is often the case in policy. Cost benefit analysis requires quantifying outcomes that are difficult to quantify, controversial. And after that, cost effective analysis can allow comparisons of multiple programs by comparing impact in terms of one outcome across schemes. It helps with decision making, particularly under a fixed budget, that is which will give the most impact for the least cost. Cost effectiveness analysis applications is vital in our society. There are so many components of cost effectiveness analysis applications. First of all, planning and management. Planning is very vital in respects of cost effectiveness analysis along with the management. If we do not prepare proper planning, cost effective analysis method cannot be applied. So, well organized planning is required in this context. Secondly, policy and decision making is the vital part for cost effectiveness analysis applications. Because policy and decision making is very important in our workplace, because if policy and decision making is not pinpointed and exhaustive, it cannot be applied in cost effectiveness analysis. Third point is that resource allocations is important part for cost effectiveness analysis. So resource allocations must be properly organized and properly allocated. If we do not allocate the resources, the cost effective analysis cannot work properly. In health services, when it is inappropriate to monetize health effect, so that time cost effectiveness analysis is very vital, and it can be used in different study designs. So different study design is very much vital. So first of all, we will try to study or ground study on cost effectiveness analysis, which area it can be applied. That is very much important. Not the only criteria for decision making. Actually, cost effectiveness analysis applications is not the only criteria for decision making. So sometimes it is not the only one criteria for decision making, and that point must keep in mind. So these are the some applications areas, that is the planning and management, again policy and decision making, thirdly resource allocations, fourthly in health services when it is inappropriate to monetize health effects, and fourthly used in different study designs, and finally not the only criteria for decision making. So decision making, planning, management and resource allocations, and these areas are the very important for the applications of cost effectiveness analysis. So the methods and steps involved in conducting a cost effectiveness analysis in general. There are so many methods and steps involved in conducting a cost effectiveness analysis in general. First of all, identify the purpose and scope. So purpose and scope are very important when we will talk about the methods and steps involved in conducting a cost effectiveness analysis in general. Secondly, gather and validate data. So we will gather various types of the data and we will validate. What is validation? Which data is appropriate or pinpointed, that we can validate. Thirdly, define allocation rules. What are the rules, regulations? What are the strategy to define allocations? So allocations must be logical, must be well organized, must be systematic. Fourthly, build the simulations model. So simulations model is very much important for the cost effectiveness analysis in general. So simulations is the important components for cost effectiveness analysis. So when we build the simulation model, we must consider it is the steps involved in conducting a cost effectiveness analysis in general. So simulation must be considered in a proper way. Then fifth point, that is the very important, run simulations and analyze results. So results is very much important based on simulations. If we properly organize simulations in our workplace, we must get a very good result and that can be analyzed. And sixthly, validate and refine the model. Which model we are talking about it, that is validate, that is refined. If it has any problem or ambiguity, that must be cleared. Then communicate and present the forecast. So communication is very important for cost effectiveness analysis, and otherwise we cannot forecast our method and strategy to our clients. The methods and steps involved in conducting a cost effectiveness analysis on research activities. What are the research activities? There are so many components for research activities. First of all, that is one point that can be discussed. Define the research question. Research question is totally based on review of literature. What are the review of literature? Review of literature of the primary, secondary and tertiary data based on local level, national level and international level. After that we can get the research question. Then secondly, identify the study population. So we try to study the population. So populations is the very much vital. Without populations we cannot organize research. Thirdly, measure outcomes. So I think how to measure the outcomes, there are so many techniques and methods and tools we try to apply in this context. And collect data. Data must be collected various forms or various tools or various methods or various techniques. So various ways we can collect data, and then we can analyze the cost in a systematic way, in a critical way. We try to analyze cost and then calculate effectiveness. Then we will calculate the effectiveness or non-effectiveness, whatever it may be. And finally, conduct sensitivity analysis along with interpret and communicate results. That are the very, very vital in respects on research activity when we are talking about the cost effectiveness analysis. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the cost effectiveness analysis? The advantages: first advantages, health units are common outcomes routinely measured in clinical trials familiar to clinicians. Secondly, outcomes are easier to quantify than cost benefit analysis. Disadvantages: there are three types of the disadvantage as mentioned in the slides. That is, interventions with different types outcomes cannot be compared. Secondly, cannot combine more than one important outcomes. Thirdly, difficult to collapse both the effectiveness and side effects into one unit of measurement. The cost benefit analysis is the two part. First part is cost and second part is benefit. What is cost benefit analysis? A cost benefit analysis is done to determine how well or how poorly a planned action will turn out. Secondly, the analysis relies on the additions of positive factors and the subtractions of negative ones to determine a net result. Thirdly, cost benefit analysis has been established primarily as a tool for the use of governments in making their social and economic decisions. Fourthly, cost benefit analysis measures cost and benefits to the community of adopting a particular course of action, that is constructing a dam or bypass, etc. And finally, when investment made commensurate with the benefits derived, it can be said that operation is positive and viable. But when benefits derived do not compensate financial investment made, it can be said that it is financially non-viable and negative. The cost benefit analysis, here the general steps for cost benefit analysis are: first of all, specifying the project clearly. Secondly, describe quantitatively the inputs and outputs of the program. And thirdly, estimate the social cost and benefit of these inputs and outputs of the program. And fourthly, compare these benefits and cost. First of all, specify clearly the project or programs. The first step is to decide on the perspective from which the study is to be done. Secondly, when we have decided on the perspective on the main elements of the projects, such as the study of the location, timing, group involved, the connections with other program, etc. should be considered. When the project is fixed, the following two programs are involved. First program, that is physical projects. What is physical project? These projects are physical in nature, which is done when an area is polluted. That is public waste treatment plants, hazardous waste removal, etc. Secondly, regulatory projects. These projects regulate the amount of pollutions in the society, that is enforcement of environmental law and regulations, water disposal practice, restrictions of land for certain activities, etc. Secondly, describe quantitatively the inputs and outputs of the program. For some projects, it is easy to identify the input and output. For that is, if we are planning a wastewater treatment project, the staffs of that program will be able to provide a full physical specification of the plant together with the inputs required to build it and keep it running. However, it is harder to predict the externalities caused by the dispositions of nuclear waste, because a restrictions on development in a particular area can be expected to detect development elsewhere into the surrounding areas. Third point is that estimate the social cost and benefit of these inputs and outputs. The next step is to put values on input and output flows, that is to measure cost and benefits. And secondly, we could do this in any units, but in many cases we will be dealing with effects, especially on the benefit sides, that are not directly registered on market. Thirdly, this means that we try to translate all the impacts of the projects or the program in order to make them comparable among themselves as well as with the types of public activities. Fourth point is that compare these benefits and cost. Next step is to make comparisons between cost incurred and benefit derived from the projects. Secondly, one of them is to subtract the total cost from the total benefit to get net benefit. Total cost, that is total benefit, equal net benefit. If the net benefit is positive, then the cost benefit is positive. If the net benefit is negative, then the cost benefit is negative. Another method is called cost benefit ratio. It is calculated by taking the ratio of benefit and cost. Cost benefit analysis has merits. First merit is the cost benefit analysis may be applicable for both the new as well as old project. It is based on accepted social principles, that is on individual preference. Thirdly, this method encourages development for new techniques for the evaluation of social benefits. There are some demerits of cost benefit analysis. First of all, the government is not completely aware of all the cost and benefit associated with the program. Secondly, this approach does not clearly stated that who should bear the population control cost. Thirdly, the method of collecting data for this analysis is generally biased. How is cost effective analysis different from cost benefit analysis? Outcomes: CBA, ratio of cost of program to all identified outcomes benefits, and CEA, cost effective analysis, ratio of cost of program to one defined outcome benefits. Example: ratio of cost of education program as a ratio to its impact on learning, physical and mental health, household bargaining power, future labor market outcomes, intergenerational well-being. Ratio of cost education program as a ratio to its impact on learning. Outsourcing: there are the various types of the outsourcing, and first of all we try to know what do you mean by outsourcing. Outsourcing is subcontracting a process such as product design or manufacturing to a third-party company. The decision to outsource is often made in the interest of lowering firm or making better use of time and energy cost, redirecting or conserving energy directed at the competencies of a particular business or to make more efficient use of land, labor, capital, information technology and resources. Outsourcing became part of the business lexicon during the 1980s. It involves the transfer of the management and the day-to-day executions of an entire business functions to an external service provider. The client organizations and the supplier into a contractual agreement that defines the transferred services. Outsourcing and offsourcing. Outsourcing is the transfer of an organizational function to another country, regardless of whether the work is outsourced or staged within the same corporation or company. Secondly, nearsourcing, north-sourcing and right-sourcing. The globalizations of outsourcing operating models has resulted in new terms such as nearshoring, no-shoring and right-shoring that reflect the changing mix of location. This is seen in the opening of offices and operations centers by Indian companies in the US and UK. Overview of outsourcing. Multi-sourcing. What is multi-sourcing? Multi-sourcing is a framework to enable different parts of the client businesses to be sourced from different suppliers. Strategic outsourcing. What is strategic outsourcing? It is the organizing arrangement that emerges when firms rely on intermediate markets to provide specialized capabilities that supplement existing capabilities deployed along a firm's value chain. This is the how outsourcing helps. First of all, build talent pool. Secondly, increase efficiency. Third, reduce labor cost, operate round the clock, offers better risk management, provides flexible staffing arrangement, and finally helps to gain customer satisfaction. Process of outsourcing. Supplier competition. A competition is held whether the client marks and scores the supplier proposals. Supplier proposals. A request for proposals is issued to the shortlist suppliers requesting a proposal and a price. Deciding to outsource. The decisions to outsource is taken at a strategic level and normally requires board approval. Outsourcing is the divestiture of a business function involving the transfer of people and the sale of assets to the supplier. The process begins with the client identifying what is to be outsourced and building a business case to justify the decision. Process of outsourcing. Another components. Negotiations. The negotiations take the original RFP, the supplier proposal, based on final order, which is called BAFO submission, and convert this into the contractual agreement between the client and the supplier. These stages finalize the documentations and the final pricing structure. Contract finalization. This is the legally binding document and its core of the governance of the relationships. These are three significant dates that each party signs up to the contract signature date, the effective date when the contract terms become active, and the service commencement date when the supplier will take over the services. Then transition. The transition will begin from the effective date and normally run until 4 months after service commencement date. This is the process for the staff transfer and the take on the services. Process of the outsourcing. Another component. Transformation. The transformation is the execution of a set of projects to implement this service level agreement, to reduce the total cost of ownership or to implement new services. Emphasis is on standardizations and centralizations. Ongoing service delivery and benchmarking. This is the execution of the agreement, and last for the terms of the contract. If the terms of the contract provides for it, the provider and client may adjust the pricing based on the results of the benchmark. Terminations of renewal. Near the end of the contract term, a decision will be made to terminate or renew the contract. Termination may involve taking back services, insourcing, or the transfer of services to another supplier. So benefits of the outsourcing. Wise outsourcing can provide a number of long-term benefits given as under, that is control capital. Cost cutting may not be the only reasons to outsource, but it's certainly a major factor. Outsourcing converts fixed cost into variable cost, release capital for investment elsewhere in your business, and allows you to avoid large expenditure in the early stages of your business. Increase efficiency. Companies that do everything themselves have much higher research, development, marketing, and distribution expenses, all of which must be passed on the customers, and outside provider cost structure and economy of scale can give your firm an important competitive advantage. Reduce labor cost. Hiring and training staff for short-term or peripheral projects can be very expensive, and temporary employees do not allow life up to your expectations. Outsourcing lets you focus your human resources where you need them most. Start new projects quickly. A good outsourcing firm has the resources to start a project right away. Handling the same projects in-house might involve taking weeks or months to hire the right people, train them, and provide the support they need. Another benefit, focus on your business. Outsourcing can help your business to shift its focus from peripheral activities towards work that serves the customer, and it can help managers set their priority more clearly and level the playing field. Outsourcing can help small firms act big by giving them access to the same economies of scale, efficiency, and expertise that large companies enjoy. Reduce risk. Every business investment carries a certain amount of risk. Outsourcing providers assumes and manage this risk for you, and they generally are much better at deciding how to avoid risk in their areas of expertise. So in conclusion, cost benefit analysis gives planners a method to try and pool all relevant costs and benefits on a common temporal footing in order to help people make informed decisions. And secondly, cost benefit analysis provides people with an understanding as to economic cost of decision and allows arguments to be made for against a change based upon economic consideration. And thirdly, cost benefit analysis is a decision making process that forces the decision makers to compare all direct and indirect positive and negative effects of the proposed decision on an objective basis. A cost effectiveness analysis, comparative cost effective analysis is not enough information to make a policy decision, but it can be a good starting point. The trend towards outsourcing has been caused by several strategies and operational influences. From a strategic perspective, some human resource departments have attempted to shift their focus and resources towards a more strategic role through the use of outsourcing. To accomplish this, human resource executives have used outsourcing to relieve their departments of some of the more mundane aspects of the functions, such as those involving routine, low value added transactions. Outsourcing also has been used to help reduce bureaucracy and to encourage a more responsive and cost sensitive culture by introducing external market forces into the organizational through the bidding process. In addition, outsourcing has been used for political purposes, such as to reduce or control head count in human resources. So let's explore. There are some questions I have mentioned here with. What is the main differences between the cost effectiveness analysis and cost benefit analysis? Second, A CBA focuses on a single outcome while CA consider multiple outcomes, and then B, CA focuses on a single outcomes while CBA consider all identified outcomes. CBA is only used in health related decisions while CA applies to all sectors. CA is more complex than CBA in quantifying outcomes. These are the some answer is there some here. I think there are some questions I have mentioned here with when is cost effective analysis most useful, and another point is when comparing multiple programs based on one outcome. Third, what is one of the main merits of the cost benefit analysis? So here are the some options. It is only applicable for new projects. It encourages the development of new evaluation techniques. It does not rely on individual preferences. It focuses only on environmental projects. Fourth question, what is the main goals of outsourcing? To transfer all business functions to an external company, to improve efficiency by using external resources for specific processes, to eliminate labor cost by moving all work overseas, to replace full-time employees with temporary workers. So thank you.